Some number of years ago, the comedian and TV personality Stephen Colbert did an interview on his old TV show, The Colbert Report, with Georgia Congressman Lynn Westmoreland. Now, the congressman had sponsored a bill that would have required the display of copies of the Ten Commandments in public buildings, such as local courts and state capitals. The whole interview is quite amusing, but the climax comes after Westmoreland. He's finished extolling the virtues of the Ten Commandments and their place in our society. And so Colbert asks him to name all 10 of the Ten Commandments. The congressman hems and haws a bit, guesses at 3 of them, and then gives up. It's a great video clip if you're looking for a chuckle. I'm sure you can search that up on YouTube or somewhere like that. Really, the fact is that many of us could not list the Ten Commandments if we were similarly pressed. In fact, I admit that there have been times when I couldn't. There was a time a few years ago as a test before looking at the passage that we've heard this morning that I sat down and wrote down all the commandments that I could remember, and I came up with about 7, and I'm supposed to be a professional, right? When I've likewise done this with groups of people, we typically end up coming up with at least a couple of things that people think are part of the Ten Commandments, but actually are not. Perhaps we shouldn't feel so bad about this. As I said, this congressman who thought it was just imperative that we require their display at Capitol buildings and other places couldn't even name more than 3 off the top of his head. And for that matter, among the different traditions that have the Exodus story as part of our sacred scriptures, we can't even all agree on how the 10 are numbered. Roman Catholics and Lutherans have one system of numbering. The Eastern Orthodox and the non-Lutheran Protestants, including us and the Anglicans and all the rest, they have a different system. And Jewish tradition, at least in places, has yet a 3rd way of numbering these. And so we have these so-called 10 Commandments, and most of us seem to think that they are important, foundational, central things in our faith tradition. But we don't agree on how even to number them, and even if we did, most of us can't remember all of them anyway. Perhaps that's okay. I say that not because the things expressed in the Ten Commandments aren't important, but rather because they sort of seem pretty natural. I mean, do any of you, like me, remember your mom or dad or someone else in your life ever saying to you, "I shouldn't have to tell you. You shouldn't need to be told that. I shouldn't have to tell you to stop picking on your sister. You shouldn't need to be told to pick up your dirty clothes off the floor." There's a sense, I think, that the Ten Commandments are a bit like that. We shouldn't have to be told most of them. I mean, most of us would be a little worried, in fact, if someone's only reason for not doing many of the things in the Ten Commandments was simply that Exodus chapter 20 said so. Oh, I was going to murder someone this afternoon, but the 6th commandment says I'm not supposed to, so I guess I won't. We would rightly be concerned more than a little about someone who seriously thought that way. We shouldn't have to be told. I shouldn't have to be told not to covet. And actually, I'd rather prefer that you not tell me that when I'm, oogling the next forthcoming product from Apple Computer or the new car that my favorite car manufacturer is working on. We shouldn't have to be told not to steal. But there are probably a lot of multinational conglomerates that would prefer you not do so when you're looking into some of their business practices in the third world. We shouldn't have to be told to make no idols and have no other gods. But if good old Martin Luther was right that a God is that from which we expect all good and to which we are to take refuge in all distress, well, then there are a lot of people, including many of us, who at least at times have made gods out of money or status or community or family or being right. We shouldn't have to be told not to make wrongful use of the name of the Lord our God. But apparently there are a lot of political figures and popular movements who do need to be told exactly that, as they claim nothing short of God's backing and endorsement for their endeavors. So I guess when it comes down to it, these things may seem like naturals, but we do still need to be reminded of them. Perhaps we have trouble remembering all 10 of these because if we are honest with ourselves, we know that there is probably not a single one of us who would get off scot-free from all 10. Broken, disobeyed, unfulfilled. It sort of describes the whole list, doesn't it? Or does it? Maybe there is, in fact, one item on this list that has not been broken, that does not go unfulfilled. You see, back a few moments ago when I told you that there were at least 3 different ways of numbering this passage to get to 10, you probably thought that was a random bit of trivia. And maybe it is. But I actually think that one of the systems provides a unique window into understanding the truth behind the covenant that God made with the Israelites. In the Jewish tradition, where they call this passage the 10 words rather than the 10 commandments. And in fact, that is what the first verse says. God spoke all these words. Number 1 for them is simply this: I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. That's the first word. That alone is the first word, the first commandment, if you will. Everything else, everything that we are commanded to do or not to do, it all stems from that first word. I am the Lord your God. I am the Lord who brought you out. I am the Lord who delivered you. And that, my friends, is a word that will never be broken. The Exodus story that we've been following all these weeks this fall. This Exodus story flows from deliverance to discipleship, not the other way around. The scene in which we find today's passage opens with the Israelites arriving at the foot of Mount Sinai, the holy mountain of God, after traveling through the wilderness for 3 months. And and as the people gather in this sacred space, God speaks to them through Moses, saying, "You have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself." God does not demand the people's obedience in order to liberate them. Rather, God sets the captives free and then teaches them what living in true freedom looks like. Free from other things that would claim to be God but are not. Free from the toil of endless work, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Free from theft, free from death, free even from the tyranny of worshiping ourselves. These 10 commandments, they come as the beginning of the covenant that God makes with God's people. And often we think of a covenant almost like a contract, this sort of two-way street sort of thing where each side has a part to keep. And it's true, but in this case, one of the differences between a contract and a covenant, in this case, even as the Israelites would later let down their side of the bargain, God still kept God's side. God kept God's side as the people were brought back from exile. God kept God's side by coming to us in Jesus. God kept God's side by sending the Spirit. I am the Lord your God. God kept God's side. And God keeps God's side still today. God keeps God's side still today as we gather here at this table. No matter how perfect or how broken you are, at the table, God still says, "Come." No matter how many commandments you may remember or say that you keep or say that you have broken, at the table, God still says, "Take and eat." No matter how many commandments you think you've broken, or you have broken but didn't even realize it, at the table, God still says, "My body given for you." I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. God shouldn't have to tell us that. But nevertheless, come to this table, and you will hear it once more. Blessing and honor, glory and power be unto God, now and forever. Amen.